Alright, in this video we're going to go over applications of minimum spanning trees. So the first one is the one that was originally motivating the idea of a minimum spanning tree, as well as many of the algorithms developed to find a minimum spanning tree, which is laying out any sort of connections or networks on a grid, like a power grid or a telecommunications grid, or any other networking connection system. So it's easiest to just think of telephone or cable wiring or electric grid wiring. But basically you have all of these different nodes that are the different places that need the connection, and what's the least expensive way to connect them all to minimize the number of total connections would be a MST problem. Another example of where MSTs come up in another application is anything that involves clustering, which shows up in actually lots of different applications. In bioapplications, clustering individuals by phenotype and try to determine what genes influence what traits, clustering images by pixel color to identify objects in pictures, or clustering essays by various features to see how students learn to write in education, research, and whatnot. So data clustering is like a big cloud area of application that shows up a lot in the area of MSTs, finding MSTs. Here's kind of a fun application. So you can use Kruskal's, which finds MSTs to randomly generate mazes. So if any of you are interested in like gaming or in general like developing games, this is really cool. So you create a grid graph, you give each edge a random weight, and then you compute the MST of that graph. This will be a random way to generate a maze. It's not too difficult to do, and it works out really well. So that's a cool application of Kruskal's, is to use it to randomly generate mazes. Another application is stem cells. So this is definitely a more scientific application, and lots of literature around this area. But how can you determine the patterns by which stem cells differentiate into specialized cells? So the basic idea is you can grab random collections of cells that you know contain stem cells, and then you can measure all these different features from each cell and plot those features on a plot with x, y coordinates, and then cluster the nodes into smaller groups, which are likely going to represent cells that have a similar type. And then basically find an MST. Nodes are clusters and edges are distances. This would be the cheapest tree that connects all those clusters. Then you can basically figure out which cluster represents the original stem cells, and you now likely have a differentiation pattern. So graphs show up in all sorts of things, particularly in nature, and as we're getting more and more computational power, we're able to do more with them because we have the ability to represent things on this very micro scale with computing power that we've now been developing over the past 10-20 years have made this actually possible. So really lots of cool stuff. That's it. That's all I have for applications of minimum spanning trees.